Okay, welcome everybody. Just going to give a moment or two, just while a couple of our lovely guests are being admitted, and then we will make a start. Okay, so I'm Sarah Hills, business owner of Cube International, and previously Carpe Omnia. Had the pleasure of being at and sponsoring the Change Awards for the last couple of years, and really delighted when I kind of met Gary, one of the winners at this year's Change Awards. Subsequently, not only from what you're going to hear about Gary and how amazing he's been with this kind of change that he led, but interestingly enough, we also discovered he lives very close to my dad, who is in Pomeroy, Northern Ireland. So he's actually literally pretty much around the corner from my dad. So small world. And Gary, also, I had the pleasure of coming on when I did the APMG change management training as well, which was lovely to have, an expert join the training. So that was all great. So enough about that. So about Gary then. So from construction to culture, which in itself, I think is just a hugely, riveting title. And how Translink built a future-ready transport hub and future-ready workforce. So Gary is going to tell you all about that and who he works for. So that's going to start in a moment. Just to mention some of Margot's and the Change Awards other wonderful sponsors and partners that have been supporting the Change Awards. So Investigo, Grace, Cube International, which, like I say, is myself. And I'm sure there will be several others participating and joining us for the upcoming next year as well. You don't want to miss out on some of the upcoming change talks. There's some really great offers and packages, so please, please, please take a look. People always say to me when I'm delivering training, they want reality. They want to know what people are actually doing to make a difference. So this is your perfect opportunity to actually hear from those people making a difference. So absolutely, find out more, and here are some of the upcoming ones that will be coming soon. So the ones you can watch on demand, Modernising the Coldest Workplace on Earth. Again, what a great title. There can be so much meant by that. Hidden ROI of Culture from Acquisition to Alignment. And then upcoming, the one that you're about to hear from Gary, From Construction to Culture. And then Using Lean Change to Build Future-Ready Change Capability. So like I say, you don't want to miss out, and there will be more upcomings that we'll be sharing as well soon. So now I'm going to pass over to Gary because it's all about him, and that's who you've come here to hear from. So Gary, over to you. Oh, sorry, should have said any questions. We'd be absolutely delighted. It's all about you, our audience. And I'm sure there's things that as Gary's talking, you'll want to know. So please just pop in the chat box any questions that you have, and then Margot will kindly at the end facilitate the question time. So please pop in your questions throughout, and then at the end we will happily answer those. Gary, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Just bear with me while I share my screen. 2 seconds, folks. This has disappeared on me.
If you scroll down, Gary, to the bottom with your mouse, in the middle, there is an arrow in green that says share. We should have tested that, but we didn't. Great. So
2 seconds. I think I have it. The presentation has disappeared just for a second.
Well, there was a technology blackout, and I think Gary is experiencing the AWS issues.
Don't worry, Gary. We know that, having won the award, we know you'd be great at, coping with the pressure.
Are you seeing that now? No, no,
Not yet.
Oh,
No,
not yet. No.
no, sorry.
that's all right. So you just need to share probably the window that it's on.
Yeah, I'm doing that, but it's not coming up.
Do you want to email me the presentation and then I can?
Yeah, hold on.
I'm not being rude, by the way. I have a cheat sheet, but I don't know what my password is.
Right,
So it's too many passwords.
I think we're in.
There you go.
Ah,
Yay!
good.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I'm going to slideshow. Still okay? Still seeing that, folks? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you click from beginning, it should then just show us
Yeah.
the slideshow.
Yeah. Okay. So, firstly, like to introduce myself. So, as Sarah has mentioned, I'm Gary Marshall, the business change lead on the new Belfast Grand Central Station in Belfast. You can see from the image there, it's the largest integrated transport facility on the island of Ireland. And while we were constructing the station, the project was the largest infrastructure project in Ireland while we constructed it, and I still believe it's probably the biggest. There's nothing that's superseded that at present anyway. So quite a large project, and you can see in the top right hand corner there the change award there, and me
Gary,
standing.
forgive me for interrupting. The slides aren't moving as you're talking, so just click onto the second one because it's still just showing the overall first page for us.
What are you seeing now, Sarah?
So still just, I can see a little arrow now. So if you click onto the second slide, hopefully that will update and then it will work as we go through. Because all we're seeing at the moment is the overall Translink Belfast Grand. That's it. Now we can see the slide you're talking about and the lovely picture there of you holding your wonderful award.
Sorry, folks, for all the technological issues here. So yeah, you can see the station there sitting in its location in Belfast with the hills behind it. As I said, it's the largest integrated transport facility on the island of Ireland. And it was the largest infrastructure project while we constructed it, and still is. I don't think that has been superseded. And you can see there the image of myself sitting with or standing with Margot's award there in the middle of the station. So as Sarah has mentioned, I won the Change Manager of the Year Public Sector at this year's Change Awards in London. So I think initially I'm going to just talk a bit about the organisation and about why the change was needed. I think it's important to understand why all this happened and what the context was in terms of the organisation and in terms of the need for the project in Northern Ireland and in a wider context on the island of Ireland. So you should be seeing a slide there now with Translink by numbers. So basically it's just giving you some context to what Translink is as an organisation. So basically we're the only public sector public transport provider in Northern Ireland, and we would have partners then in Southern Ireland with Bus Éireann and Irish Rail. So we have sort of 4,500 staff, and we support over 6,000 jobs with some of our support and supply chain there. We operate 13,000 services every day, and we have 300,000 passenger journeys per day, so quite a sizable amount of people that we move each day. We maintain 1,400 buses and trains collectively, and we cover 44 million miles per year in our bus and train network. We maintain over 80 bus and railway stations and halts, and we have 8,000 park and ride facilities where people can park their car and then avail of our services. We maintain 3 billion in terms of a railway asset, and we have 300 miles of track and over 1,600 civil structures, including bridges and other assets. Our strategy or our marketing sort of piece is centered around the slogan "Better Connected," and basically our aim is to connect people within Northern Ireland, whether that be for commuting, to socialise, or any other reason to travel, whether it's to see family or whatever the reason is. Our strategy is to just basically better connect people and help to build investment and support Northern Ireland as the main public transport provider. So why is there a need for public transport, and why was the need for change? Well, some sort of sobering statistics here. Transport produced 27% of the UK's total emissions in 2019. Of this, the majority, 91%, came from road transport. So in this sort of era, we're all very aware of the need for a sort of a sustainable transport model, and that has driven the change and driven the investment, I believe, in this game changer of a station, which we have just completed in Belfast. Just another interesting fact. So you'll see the two photographs there. So these were taken in Belfast on Oxford Street, and all the cars that you see on the left-hand picture could be, I suppose, eradicated if all those people chose to get public transport, and 2 buses would eradicate all the cars you see on the left. So in a wider context, if the UK, if everyone decided to switch just 1 car journey per month to public transport, we would save 1 billion car journeys on our roads, and we would save 2 million tonnes of carbon or CO2 emissions per year. So quite a sobering impact there for quite a small decision, perhaps taking the public transport one day per month. I think that has provided some context. So now I'm going to in the next few slides cover the station and the context of the station within the city. The slide we're seeing at the moment is Weaver's Cross, and how that fits around the city. So Weaver's Cross is the district or the place name that we have created around the station, and I suppose the aspiration is that the station will be an anchor tenant or a catalyst for investment in that area, similar to what we've seen in the likes of London's King's Cross or Paddington, where the station is redeveloped, and then there's investment around that. We own the land around the station, all that you're seeing in the teal or the green colour there, so there will be development plots popping up around the station. The hope is anyway in the next 15 to 20 years, and that investment then will be through ground rent and models like that will then be pumped back into public transport in Belfast and Northern Ireland as a whole. Just in the foreground there, you'll see the orange crane or the yellow cranes. That's where Titanic was built all those years ago, just for any Titanic fans that we may have on the call. So we're quite close to the Titanic Centre. The shopping district there in Belfast City Hall is basically the centre and the nucleus of Belfast. So we're quite close to the city centre. And the hope is that we'll, I suppose, extend the city centre out to the Weaver's Cross district. Historical context, the site has been around for a long time. The station opened in 1848, and this station that you're seeing on the slide at the moment, it was demolished in 1968, when we probably weren't as conscious of some of the lovely architecture we had, but there we go, it's gone now. It's quite a significant history to the site as well. There was soldiers left the site to go to the First World War on trains, and then in the Second World War it was bombed during the Blitz, and that was something we had to look at during the build and sort of do searches for unexploded ordnances and that. The Boyne Bridge is, you can see there, is another historic factor of the site, and one which has a very big political significance. in Northern Ireland. Some of you on the call may be aware of our recent history, and we're emerging from a conflict where we had a nationalist community and a unionist community, and the bridge that ran through our site, the Boyne Bridge, was of great significance to the unionist community. Just to the left of those pictures in Sandy Row, King William is reportedly went over that bridge on his way to the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, so that holds a big political significance, and that was another challenging aspect to the project in terms of stakeholder management. The original bridge is still underneath the ground, and then there was a railway bridge, an older bridge built in 1840, and then this was replaced with the bridge that we took away, which is the bridge you're seeing in those pictures. And it was built in Harland and Wolff, which is the same shipyard that built the Titanic. So the Titanic left that at the early part of the century, and then our bridge was made there in 1937. But that bridge has now gone as part of the redevelopment, and you can see a larger, I suppose, a nicer view of the station from the city context. So that was the reason for removing the bridge, even though there was some community opposition to that. I think we had to take the view that for the greater good, the bridge had to go. So in terms of project scope, the project value came in just shy of 300 million at 294 million. The new station had 8 railway platforms and 26 bus stands, and that sort of gave a 50% increase in terms of railway platforms, going from 4 to 8, and we increased by about 8 bus stands. So quite a significant increase, certainly in the railway anyway, and future proofing. We're still not running at capacity. Integrated bus and railway station concourse, so we're using that sort of model that maybe you would see in Network Rail, where there's a large concourse with retail offerings and things like that. Office accommodation in the station there is some limited office accommodation, not a lot, because most of the site was utilised for retail. Busway bridge was constructed to get the buses out over the railway, essentially out onto the main arterial route, which we call the Westlink. We renewed quite a lot of the permanent way, which is basically railway tracks for anyone who's not savvy with railway terms, and the signal and telecoms was renewed as far out as 8 or 9 miles sort of west of the project. Relocation of the enterprise train was brought into the station, so that was a massive change in terms of our organisation, and the Dublin to Belfast service went to another station on the other side of the city, but the decision was made to bring it into our flagship station here at the heart of Belfast, so that was a massive change for the organisation. While we were delivering the project, there was a simultaneous project running with a self-service ticket machine. We're still probably catching up with mainland UK in terms of automated ticket machines in our stations. So that project was running concurrently, and the rollout of ticket barriers. So yeah, that was a perfect storm in terms of 2 projects running alongside each other. Active travel and public realm were a big consideration in terms of the build from a planning perspective, and with a lot of cycling provision and active travel routes into the station. And again, we have made significant leaps in terms of accessibility for wheelchair users and people of limited sight, etc., where we've installed a Navi-Lane system, which is sort of the first in the UK, where you can use your app on your phone to navigate around the station and find your service. So quite a flagship installation there in terms of Navi-Lanes. These are the key headlines around the change. So our 2 older stations, the bus and rail station that we essentially replaced, had a capacity of 10 million. We were starting to exceed that, and the station is designed to cope with 20 million passenger movements per year. I think we're currently sitting around probably 11.3 million or something like that as we build back from COVID. So there's plenty of room there for expansion. As I say, we have increased our bus and rail capacity by 50%. There's 200 cycle parking spaces or cycle storage spaces, and then the big game changer for me is that the Belfast to Dublin train now comes into the station. So I suppose now to come on to maybe talk to why we're all maybe on the call and why we're all a part of this change network is to look at the change initiative, or the business change around the construction project. So this slide, I suppose, outlines the key deliverables of the change initiative, and something that I was sort of had ultimate responsibility for as we moved from the two stations into the one and the transition. I suppose that the main driver and something that the board was very concerned about was a seamless transition for passengers and staff, and all stakeholders, from the two stations to the new station, which essentially happened overnight. So that was I suppose a big consideration of the change initiative. Minimise disruption to stakeholders as well around the station. There's a large road network around the station, and other considerations. It's not all about our staff and passengers. There was other considerations to that. And deliver operational readiness for one of Europe's largest transport hubs. We believe we're probably the biggest in Europe in terms of a combined bus and rail. Now, there is bigger bus stations and obviously there's bigger train stations, but in terms of combining the two, we believe we're probably one of the largest, if not the largest in Europe. But I'm happy to be corrected on that, but that's our belief. And bring staff then on the change journey. Obviously, we worked in a very heavily unionised environment, so bringing staff on the journey to this new station from their safe and I suppose working environment that they were used to in the two stations, to bring in that integrated approach, combining bus and rail and breaking down that cultural divide. I probably should have mentioned that we combined bus and rail about 25 years ago, but there still is a culture of them and us, where bus see the rail side of the business as their competitors, and we're trying to break that down as new generations join the company. And I suppose part of this initiative was driving that as well. So this slide looks at why did this change matter so much to the organisation and to Northern Ireland. Well, it was the largest change in Translink's history. Some of the older, I suppose, colleagues that have been in the company for a long time believe that this is the biggest change to public transport in Northern Ireland in a generation. 4,500 staff were affected. 2,000 staff were significantly impacted. So, there's 2.5 of those that were impacted, but maybe not to a great extent. They might have been in the station 4 or 5 times a year. But there was 2,000, operational staff which were significantly impacted by what we were driving in terms of change. There was a digital transformation of Northern Ireland Railways, and that happened, and the hub was a catalyst for that, and I'll come on to that in a wee second. That was a sort of a curveball to the delivery of the new station, and something that we had to be very agile in terms of change to delivering that. And then it provided, I suppose it was a game changer for national and cross-border impact in terms of, opening the gateway to Dublin, encouraging investment, and some of you may be aware that there's a huge I suppose boom happening in Dublin at the moment, and I suppose we wanted a piece of that action, and what better way to do that than to improve connectivity with north and the south of the island. This slide looks at, I suppose, the strategic foundations and how we sort of set about, or I set about designing the change process for managing the change associated with this large-scale flagship government project, and how we sort of set out a roadmap to delivering this seamlessly. So ORAT was the methodology that was selected after some research, and that is operational readiness, activation, and transition. Some of you may be aware of that, but it's basically a mechanism that was designed after the Terminal 5 Heathrow, I suppose, national embarrassment, I think was the term used for that. The project was delivered textbook in terms of project delivery, but the operational readiness and the opening of Terminal 5 in Heathrow was a complete disaster. So that methodology was developed primarily for airport settings, but we have developed that and tweaked that to suit I suppose a bigger sort of transport setting in terms of bus and rail, and tweak that methodology to suit our own industry. So that, I suppose, the decision was made quite early on with some support from consultants that was the methodology that would best deliver change. The other, I suppose, big foundation was getting leadership alignment and buy-in. I suppose we're still on that change journey, which most of you will be aware of, that we still have to sort of pitch for the importance of change and how that fits into large projects, and we're probably a bit to go on that journey. So I had a lot of, I suppose, lobbying to do to the senior leadership team to get the resource and the team needed to deliver the change. I realised sort of early on that we needed quite a diverse business change team formed from all areas of the business and from outside of the business to deliver this project, given the scope and I suppose the far-reaching change that it went into the company in terms of all areas of the business. We had the opportunity then of a pilot to pilot some of these strategies in terms of the enabling works, and that was a smaller project which went before the main station build, and basically was preparing the site, moving some of our bus colleagues out of the site to facilitate building and things like that. So that was almost a mini change project ahead of the station, or the station sort of main build, which let us sort of trial some approaches and maybe tweak some of that for the main strategic change that came when the station opened. I've mentioned Heathrow there, and I think I suppose a big part of this was researching what went wrong with other massive transport transitions and moves. We also went to London a lot and spoke to some of our colleagues in Network Rail, and seconded one of them probably one day a month just to speak to them and learn from, what sort of they could have done better when they redeveloped the likes of King's Cross and some of those major London stations. So we took some of that learning and built it into our change strategy, and I suppose it's full circle as I'm now advising some of the civil service projects here in Belfast who have reached out to me to sort of learn from our mistakes or lessons learned, to sort of help bring those forward. ORAT, to do a wee bit of a deeper dive into what is ORAT, and it's essentially bridging the gap between construction and successful station operations using operational readiness, activation and transition. I suppose I use the analogy, it's a really complicated way of moving house. It's how you transition from one sort of very live dynamic building into another very live dynamic building, and ensuring sort of minimizing disruption to staff, your customers, the wider stakeholders, and I suppose the wider area at large. So it's a very structured approach to that, and if done properly, it should mitigate all or nearly all of the challenges around moving such complex buildings to other sites or massive change initiatives within them. Operational planning is the first phase, which really sort of captures strategies, which I've covered there in the last few slides. You sort of have to pick your strategy for delivering the change. Concepts is the next sort of stage where you look at sort of the concepts. We done a process concept of operations where we looked at every area of the business, what they wanted in terms of an end state, how what change looked like for them and in their end state, and then work back to the current state to see what was required. Design, again, we done a deeper dive into the ORAT strategy and looked at how we would deliver that in terms of getting into the nuts and bolts of the change strategy and developing programs, and then a plan for the operations. We had a dedicated programmer sitting with us, looking at how and when each sort of piece of the change jigsaw was going to come into place. The next section sort of broke it down into product. So what were we delivering for the customer in terms of, retail offerings, or even our services, what our timetables were going to look like in the station, what additional railway sort of services were we adding, what additional vehicles did we need, that type of thing. service then looked at, how we were going to look at things like ticket desks. Was it going to be a cashless ticket machines? Was it going to have cash? Were we going to have a ticket office? Or were we moving away from that? So all those types of things were looked at during that phase. And then performance, I suppose, how we wanted this change and what it looked like in terms of performance and how it was going to drive the benefits that were in the business case. Taking that forward then, people obviously were centred at all of that, and I'm a firm believer that any change in this initiative, people are front and centre, so we had to get the people ready, and we had to recruit people. It wasn't just a matter of changing the people or the demographic that we had to bring in new people to scale up the operation, and we had to develop massive training plans to train our existing staff and to train the people that we were recruiting. Process, we had to develop large amounts of new processes to sort of account for the integration of bus and rail, and some of you may know that when you bring a new large sort of multifaceted railway project online, there's massive safety implications and thresholds that you have to go through and prove that you have managed the change in a safe and structured way, so that there's no risk to the fare paying public. So that was a massive piece of work which we had to undertake with the rail authority. Facilities, again, we had to look at those and make sure the facilities were fit for purpose, were ready for the staff moving into them, and that was one of the huge failings of Heathrow and why it failed. Car park staff, area staff, rest facilities weren't ready, and that was a major sort of contributing factor when the report was done on Terminal 5. Handover, I'm trying to keep going here, I'm conscious of time, so there was a basic sort of analysis of what we needed at handover. Then there was an intermediate sort of intervention where we put more meat on the bones. Logistics, we looked at the logistics of, we sort of done a look ahead, sort of 2 months ahead of opening, and what needed to happen each day, right down to the last week was nearly on an hourly basis. Disruption and emergency planning, so there was a lot of events ahead of opening to do structured sort of trials and emergency exercises to make sure we were in a good place to open and in a safe place. And then the advanced sort of trials and handover was basically where we had a 2-week period running trains in, running buses in with no passengers to just basically trial the entire system, all the systems, all the technology in the station. Migration, again, that was a very structured approach, and we opened bus a month ahead of rail to let that bed in, and then we opened the rail a month later, so that was a very phased and calculated approach to bringing our passengers over to the new station. And then the last phase, I suppose, is the easy bit. That's opening it and crossing your fingers and hoping that everything goes okay, and it largely did. There was no major headlines around opening, and all went seamlessly. There was a few teething problems, which you'd expect, but it was largely a successful opening and one that we were very proud of and able to look back on. So that's really a whistle-top tour of ORAD, and you can see it sort of brings construction, regulatory and government sort of guidelines, safety, and all the parameters you have to meet, and then internal and external stakeholders are brought into that sort of circle as well. In terms of the team, I suppose I realised early on that I had to build a very diverse team, and there was a budget, so we were constrained by that. So I headed up the change process and the ORAD process. I had Mark Donald, who was largely a business change project manager. John Harrison was business change, but he focused more on the systems and commissioning, M&E, and all the technology that was changing. And then Suda, who some of you may know was over at the Change Award. Suda was knew the business, knew the processes, worked around a lot of the other departments in the business over the last 20 years, so had a unique insight to who to talk to, when to talk to, who needed to develop new procedures and all of that. So a very mixed and diverse team in terms of delivering the change. In terms of the core team is in the centre. the smaller circles, or the periphery there, is all the departments then that we had business change champions. So we had a team of colleagues who gave up, I suppose, approximately 2 days a week outside their day jobs and were seconded out of those departments. So we had engineering, bus, rail, ticketing, we had a benefits champion, we had a branding and marketing champion, we had a computer or IT champion, and then a human resources champion. So those people all fed into the nucleus, which was the four of us in the centre, and they fed into the change process. It was a two-way information flow where we had requests of them in terms of their departments. They went back to their people, managed the change, and then brought it back in a very structured way. There was a governance then piece around that, where we had a monthly steering group where the senior leadership team went to, and then I reported to on each section of the change process, and there was, that was scrutinised and challenged, and it was probably seen at the start as a tool to police our team, but in the end it turned out very productive, and they were able to help us a lot as opposed to challenging us. Overcoming barriers. So what was the biggest barriers? Probably the barriers were SLT, or the senior team, didn't appreciate the scale of the change and the impact it was going to have, and the ask of what was coming. As it was, one of the directors asked me one day what kept me awake at night leading up to the station opening, and I responded saying that some of the departments don't realise the amount of work they have to put in to make this happen. So that was probably a barrier, getting that sort of message across. Wide range of internal stakeholders with unique needs. As I said, we had a very sort of unionised environment that was challenging at times, and not all stakeholders were on the same sheet in terms of what their aspirations were for the station, so that required a lot of management. And then, as I say, there's still a cultural divide even to this day between bus and rail, which we are working sort of tirelessly to try and break down, but it still exists, and we're probably still on that journey. As I mentioned with the bridge there's a very complex political history in Northern Ireland, as most of you will be aware, and we were building the station in the middle of an interface with one community on one side and another community on the other side. So that was extremely challenging as well, and something we had to be very conscious of. So NIROC, I mentioned a digital transformation that was a curveball in terms of delivering the change. So this was a major curveball, and one that sort of came as probably a shock and wasn't anticipated at the start of the project. NIROC is the Northern Ireland Rail Operating Centre, which in layman's terms basically means it's converting the old sort of analog technology, which you see on the left there from the 1980s, 90s, to a digital signalling system on the railway. And it was realised sort of about a year or 2 years into the programme for the station that if we didn't bring forward the project, or the phase one of NIROC, ahead of the station build, we would be doing a lot of abortive work, and we'd have to go in and redo a lot of the work in the station, and there was all sorts of cost implications to that. So we had to make quite a dynamic and agile decision to bring phase one, which you'll see in the yellow section there. It covers the nucleus of Belfast and the main sort of densely populated railway system in the north, and then you have the red section, which was phase three, and phase two heading south. So that was a curveball. That was a £25 million project in its own right. In terms of change, it was significant because railway signallers and controllers are one of the most vocal and challenging union groups we have in the business, and their world was being turned upside down from, there was quite an old demographic in terms of age profile in there. And a lot of the guys and girls in there didn't want to make the transition over to the new technology. It scared a lot of them. A lot of them took the decision to retire. We had to manage an entire sort of recruitment process and a training scheme to bring the signallers that wanted to stay within the industry up to speed with the new technology, and train new signallers that come in to replace the older guard that left. So that was a massive curveball, and something that we had to sort of be agile around and work through as the station developed. Driving the change through innovation. So I think probably that was one of the best things, or one of the sort of most innovative things we done on the project in terms of change. We use technology a lot to drive the change communications. Most of you'll be aware, large buildings now require a building information model, which is basically a computer generated model of the entire build. So we were able to utilize that to provide training for staff. We realized during the training matrix sort of design that we had 2,000 staff to train in quite a short window, and with their own day jobs, that was very challenging. So if we could do some of that offline and issue that to them in a digital format, that would mitigate the need for long training programs. Some of the pictures there will show you some of the technology we used. The bottom one there is quite a good. We had developed for the new route into the station for the bus drivers, we used a digital model, basically a virtual drive-through of what it looked like coming into the new station, and we were able to distribute that to 2,000 bus drivers via their app on their mobile phones, and they were able to sit in their own time and review that. So that was one example. In terms of rail, we developed train simulators to train the drivers on the new route layout. And there was a lot of work convincing the trade unions that was safe, and that they didn't actually need to drive the route without passengers. So that was a first for Translink, and something that went really, really well. Leadership and agility was emphasised throughout, and we had to take decisions to train people in different ways just to make it happen in terms of programme. Engaging with people was vitally important, and we used a lot of different mechanisms for that. Negotiation and listening was very important, as it is with all change projects. One standout sort of piece of work was when we were doing NIROC, the controllers and the signallers. There was going to be no sort of natural light in the new building, and we had to come up with innovative ways to mitigate that. That was a major gripe of the unions, so we had to basically put up a suspended ceiling that mimicked the sky and changed as the day sort of got darker and weather changed, and sort of mimic what natural light looks like. So that was one way we mitigated some of the union concerns. Passengers and communities that were impacted by the service disruptions, there was a massive comms piece around educating our passengers on the change that was coming, and there was a stakeholder matrix used to prioritise engagement with all external and internal stakeholders. And I'm conscious of time, I won't go into all the intricacies of that collaborative tree, but we developed that to sort of let us see on a visual who we were talking to, how we were talking to them, and what their sort of needs were. So that was a very useful tool. So excuse me. So transformational results. We got there in the end. We have a successful station sitting at the heart of Belfast. We've got the 26 bus stands. We have the 8 railway platforms. The customer experience is excellent. We have regenerated excuse me. We have regenerated the area. Weaver's Cross is starting to progress, and there's 2 plots within that wider development which are now seeing inquiries for investment, and the hope is that those 2 plots will start very soon. And there's improved staff facilities and working conditions, and the staff are, for the most part, are overjoyed at what they have. They've one of the best facilities in terms of Translink as an estate, and they're really happy with their environment. We've won a lot of awards for the project, for all aspects of the project. Obviously, Marigold were very interested in the Change Awards there. So, as I said at the outset, I personally won Change Manager of the Year. The project picked up a major change with the project runner-up in the Change Awards, and then the project at large has won numerous other awards. And you can see there we won major rail project of the year in the UK, over 20 million. So that was a big win for us, and that's the photograph there in the centre of the image. In terms of feedback from the passengers, it's been exceptional, positive by the staff and other stakeholders. we done an initial survey there, and 96% of the customer base were coming back as satisfied. And 1 in 3 of the people surveyed, it was their first time in the station, and a lot of them, it was their first time engaging meaningfully with public transport, which is brilliant. So in terms of improved change capability, I think this is a really important piece. We improved the capability of the organisation in terms of what we can deliver in terms of change. I have improved, personally in my career development, as have the team and the change champions and the organisation at large. We've probably become better at more responsive, agile decision making. We're not afraid to make the difficult decisions around change, and I think we've probably learned that we need to use technology to support change through our training scheme for the new transport hub. And I think we have also maybe come on a journey with the senior leadership team, and I think we've now got our place potentially at the boardroom table in terms of change does matter, and change managers are sort of critical to delivering an agile company or institution. Reflections and legacy, as I've said, it's been a very sort of steep learning curve for me in terms of personal leadership journey, and something that has been both scary and enjoyable. We have sustained and achieved a massive amount of change, and we're sustaining that change. We're not reverting back to our old ways, and we are sort of still working on the project. There's about 8 months left as we do some of the public realm around the station, and some of the photographs show there the square that we're currently building at the front of the station, and then some of the development plots on the left there. That the hope is, the legacy is, it will transform that part of Belfast and be a catalyst for investment in that area as we come out of I suppose a post-conflict Northern Ireland, and hope for a better future for some of the younger people. So we're coming near the end, folks, but I suppose this last slide is focusing on the real winners of this change initiative, and I firmly believe the real winners are the next generation. I think they will see the real benefits of the station. The Weavers Cross development around that will hopefully have happened by that stage. We're probably a 15 to 20 year program for that. The kids you see in this photograph will probably be at uni at that stage, or starting to travel. And my own daughter will probably form part of that, and I think they're the real winners, and hopefully they can grow up in a better Northern Ireland than I grew up, and the station will go some way to promoting that. So that's really all from me. Happy to take any questions. I realise we went a bit over time there with the technology issues at the start, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gary. I mean, I'm just in awe. The whole thing was just fascinating. And I think, like you say, everybody, I'm sure, will agree why you absolutely won that award for the best change manager at the Change Awards, deservedly so. And that we're aligned in our thinking, the fact that, saying, people are front and centre, and you didn't need to cross your fingers as such, hoping on opening day it'd be okay, because you really understood, as we know, that so much is about being ready. And, if we do those things that you did well, it should absolutely be okay. But I'm going to shut up now and hand over to Margot.
No, honestly,
it's so inspiring.
No, honestly, I am shocked, and I was listening to you, Gary, and I was thinking, oh, my question should be how many people were working on this project, and then you show the slide, and it's you and 3 colleagues, and that's phenomenal. And even I can even imagine that building that network of individuals who are there around to help you must have taken some time.
Yeah. Now there was a wider team obviously involved with the construction, but in terms of change, that was the core team. Yeah, and you're right, Margot. Those change champions had to be very strategically picked, that they were going to be of the right mindset, had the influence in their departments, and were able to deliver what we needed.
There are some questions in the chat. One question is actually regarding your time frame. So how long did it take to actually, from the very beginning to the very end? Have you been as a change function engaged from the very start? when the initiative was being developed, or were you brought in a little bit later? Because in terms of preparation, even it sounds like quite an extensive time is needed.
Yeah, so that was probably a very good question. There was a key learning from the project. I probably, well, it's not personal about me. There should have been a change manager there a lot sooner. I was brought in about 2020, and a lot of the designs were complete at that stage, and change wasn't given its place at the table. I feel, in terms of, I had to work through problems that if I had been in 2 years early could probably have mitigated. So that is a key lesson learned, and I think the business has taken that on board. But to get back to how long I was there, so I worked primarily from 2020, and then the station opened, I suppose, the latter part of last year there, end of 24. So, or the summer and the autumn of 24. So largely, I suppose, 3 years, 9 months type of thing.
Wow.
To deliver that. Now that included the enabling works, the building of the busway bridge. There was 4 phases of the build. So a massive. The last 2 years were probably the most intense, and then that was the last 6 months. Then became really intense. The last month was crazy. So that was.
But I have to admit, you are probably the first organization I'm hearing about that has delivered the project so successfully, that it highlighted to the board that the change management function is immensely important, and therefore you are deserving, I shall say, but deserving your place at the board. I've never heard of an organization where, at least here in the UK, where change management is board level. That's so.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. Well, I know. I maybe misled you. I'm not on the board, but certainly the board understands business change, and
fine. Yeah.
certainly they realise the importance of it. So it's something that certainly this journey has helped them to understand that, and I suppose it's just continuing to keep banging that drum and making sure that it stays there, because as people change and suppose the board changes, that could revert back to old ways, but we need to keep banging that drum.
Hopefully doesn't. And the last question, because I'm also conscious of people time. What is your biggest advice or was your advice for handling difficult stakeholders that are resisting to change, especially that in this case there has been so many interest groups?
I suppose you have to listen to them. Sometimes what you see maybe isn't a big deal. To them, it is. That was the case. One prime example there was the railway signallers. They were quite a tricky demographic. They always have been, because they have a lot of power in the organisation. You can't run trains without signallers. And I suppose I had to look at very sort of innovative ways of dealing with them, to the point where I used to take two of the union reps out for coffee and sort of go, "What's your big challenges here? How do we work through this?" So you had to step outside your normal approaches or communication styles to get those big wins, and sometimes doing small things for them bought you a lot of influence, or bought you a lot of sort of, I suppose, brownie point, where you were able to give them something in terms of upgrade their facility slightly with at very little cost, but it started to change that sort of culture of resistance. But I suppose the key takeaway is listen to everybody, no matter whatever level they are at the organisation. And sometimes you'll get to the core of the problem from the people that are lower down in the organisation than some of the managers.
So the final question from me, which is on the kind of a funny side. How many hours a week do you work, Gary? Because I can't imagine this was done in 37 per week.
No, leading up both for the last year, before it opened, now not other than the last year, there was nights I was working 9 or 10 at home on the laptop. Weekends, like for the last sort of 2 to 3 months, it was weekends. So we actually got, there was my sort of leave allocation I had to take this year, because I didn't get any of it last year. So it was, yeah, very challenging, and I suppose a very understanding partner and daughter, but we got there in the end. So
Yeah. Well, congratulations, because commitment from the leadership. We all know that it's very important, and people who have inspiring leaders amongst them tends to be also inspired themselves and deliver more. There are no more questions, Sarah. So leaving it to you.
Okay, perfect. And I'm sure some of the audience, and I know some people will be catching later on as well. But any questions that you kind of want to ask post this, please get in touch with Margot or myself
yeah,
or Gary. And because actually I'm just, like I say, in awe of how much was covered just in this session and how much more could be spoken about. So Gary, hats off to you. Anyway, but and hopefully we get to do some more work together in the future. Thank you, Margot, as always, as well, for it's such a privilege always doing anything to assist with the Change Awards, and that's music to your ears as well as mine. I'm sure that it is about hopefully people recognizing change is it just as much needed as project management. You can't have one without the other. So if we keep rallying, we will get there. So thank
yeah.
you.
I suppose just to come back around both of yourselves, you do an excellent job in terms of the Change Awards, Margot, there, and promoting change on a wider spectrum across the globe. And then I suppose Sarah, yourself there, with the training and the academic qualifications there around change is very important as well. And it's a blend of experience and gone through some of that theory. So all very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Let's close the call. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye bye bye.